welcome to my channel. So today's topic of discussion is going to be a thinking process, and I want to think about mass and how it moves. And I'm going to use a descriptive term that I've never heard before. And the descriptive term is particle wave amplification. So you kind of need to know some stuff. You need to know what a particle is, you need to know what a wave is, and you need to know what amplification is, and the terms and why I'm using those, and using them in conjunction. A particle is the smallest bit of matter that we can come up with, based primarily in an energy form that's slowed down to a point where it is consistent with other mass. In other words, it's a particle. It's the smallest bit that we can locate, find, and possibly utilize. A wave is the energy form transferring either that particle from point A to point B, or it's the energy the particle is putting out in something that we can detect, like a wave of energy through the ocean or wavelengths of light, even though everything is made up, as far as we can tell, as particles. Amplification is the ability to intensify the wave and move the particle faster. So imagine that the particle is a buoy on the water. Very simple concept. And as you are watching waves hit the buoy on the water, you can amplify the waves. So you can create a larger wave pattern through effects that are beyond the particle and move the particle higher, lower, or forward, or theoretically backwards from its current position. And this has to do with things like time, speed, and energy losses. So I don't want to get too far into that because this is a thinking concept, and I've never heard anyone speak on it. But I'm going to describe why I'm bringing this to your attention. So NASA had a program with the shuttles that America used in the 80s. And these shuttles had large amounts of liquid fuel on them that had to be spun through high velocity turbines to mix properly, so that way they could have a rocket that would eject the fuel in a perfect burn. In the process of doing so, the ship, the vehicle I should say, would leave the proximity of the planet and head towards the outer atmosphere, and then head into what we would consider to be space. So that way they could install things like the International Space Station in orbit, and that's what they're attempting to attain, is orbit, a stable location floating around the planet. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the astronauts that were in these ships noticed some things, and it has to do with the high velocity turbines that were mixing the fuels that were being ejected out of the rockets. And this is an extremely noisy process. You've got tons and tons of material exiting the vehicle. You have air resistance that's causing huge amounts of noise. You have the burn cycle, which is extremely noisy, and the astronauts still noticed a secondary vibration set inside the vehicle. This secondary vibration set happened to be those high velocity turbines. And what happened, as far as was described to me, was there's a harmonic resonance within the propulsion of the vehicle through the atmosphere, the high spinning turbines, and there was an equalization of forces that caused a physical effect that people could notice. And humans are very, very sensitive creatures. And they noticed this high frequency resonance harmony, and nobody really talks about it because it's extremely odd to think about. So the vehicle is now traveling at theoretically thousands of miles an hour out of the atmosphere. And as it's doing so, because that's to break gravitational pull, as it's doing so, it's going through less atmosphere, which means there's less resistance. And as it goes through less resistance, there's less noise. And as there's less noise, there's less vibration by hitting particles as the vehicle is leaving the atmosphere, which is dense. In which case, these vibrations start doubling up on themselves. And it was disconcerting to the astronauts because they thought they might explode. They thought something was wrong. They actually had to radio down and say, hey, we seem to have an issue. And NASA, being the controlled thinking process that it is basically like, nothing we can do now. Write it out. And the astronauts noted it. They successfully survived and went into space, predominantly most of them. We did have a couple of losses, which are tragic. But that key there, the key that I'm talking about, is the high-speed vibration, harmonic resonance of particle wave amplification, as I'm calling it. The particles inside the turbine, the fuels going past the turbines, the shift of resistance, and the impacts of the vehicle going through atmosphere shifted and changed. Now, that's a really good example of how harmonic frequencies can be identified, because beyond any other physical format, the ship's crew could figure it out. NASA had to later on figure out what they're talking about and determine that what they're talking about was those turbines. But this brings up the point of resonance, okay, particles, waves, and amplification. I didn't say resonance in my statement, but I should have. But I didn't want to make it too complex in the item that I'm saying. So particle, wave, amplification would induce resonance, or resonance would be induced, and harmonic resonance in particular. And nobody talks about being able to do that except for people possibly in the pulse jet systems, where they are creating particle wave resonance by pulsing energy in an explosion out of multiple jets out of the back of a booster rocket, and each explosion of fuel is timed on the explosion before it, and it's done in such a way that those pulses amplify each other, and we can get a pulse jet to go faster than the normal jet just by organizing the way the molecules are exploding and when the timing is happening. This is interesting because not a lot of scientists are talking about how to move particles with less energy involved and less mass through the use of forces that are currently around them. There is something about timing and angle and trajectory and things, but not a lot of scientists are saying, hey, what about being able to create a harmonic resonance that causes a frequency uptick that we can time with a pulse? And that is where particle wave amplification would come in. We'd be amplifying the wave that would be moving the particle faster or slower or changing its direction. And this is not well conceived of. It's not thought up or brought to attention very often because it's not been described. So I'm trying to describe it. In the process of this description, I'm going to give another example. Another example is recently, in the last 10 or 15 years, and it's 2024, the clothing industry had a interesting shift in thinking for drying clothes without tumbling them or putting them through a heating cycle. And the way this works is that the clothing was put on a line. The line had a harmonic frequency pulsed through it, and the clothing vibrated to a point where the water disassociated from the clothing mass, and the clothing dried without further application. In other words, the water was shaken off due to high frequency harmonic resonance. Well, the reality is you just can't put that in somebody's house as far as they were concerned. It wasn't reasonable. So it could not solve the issue of drying clothing in a reasonable manner versus the size of a tumbling gas-fired or electric-fired dryer. But the proof of concept goes back a ways. The proof of concept goes back to Tesla. Nikola Tesla performed an experiment with a battery and an oscillating system to cause resonant frequencies inside of a brand new building that was being constructed, and he got it to resonate and harmonize so much that the shaking was so intense that the people that were building the building at the time evacuated the building thinking there's an earthquake. In which case, the story goes, Nikola Tesla packed up his stuff and quietly left. But that was the first historical evidence of harmonic resonance that was utilized to move objects, other than things like speakers and sound waves to move noise so we can hear it. We may have other systems that were involved, but there's no system for amplifying the speed of a rocket or a projectile to get out of atmosphere due to harmonic resonance. So that thinking process is evolving. What I'm talking about is multiple systems going into effect and multiple forms of timing. This is extremely difficult to wrap my mind around, and so therefore I'm putting it out there so other people may wrap their minds around it and bring forth a possible solution while reducing our reliance upon energy to move objects, reducing the reliance upon burned fuel energies to move objects. This is to help reduce the use of chemical fuels and the burning process, the internal combustion or the combustion process of burning said fuels, and still getting a better effect. In other words, reducing the volume of fuels needed to get from point A to point B. It may be a very, very, very long time before this is put into some form of actuality. But in the past, scientists thought that to get to other stars, they could create a starship that had a parabolic thick steel plate on the back of it, and they could detonate nuclear bombs on that. And every time they reached a peak of efficiency for the speed at which the explosion had moved them along through space, because there's no such thing as fire in space, they would detonate another nuclear bomb. And this would have a couple of beneficial effects. One, it'd get rid of the nuclear bombs on the planet, which are very dangerous for us. And two, it might create interstellar travel. Now, they later scrapped that idea because it was completely unreasonable to get that kind of mass into space. But that also is an example of pulse technology in space, of reaching some type of efficiency for moving mass while catching an amplitude wave and then exploding exactly on the point where it would amplify the wave's current velocity or height or depth to get the ship to move faster through space. In other words, very similar to the pulse rocket the pulse jet rockets that we currently have, or the ramjet rockets we currently have. That technology is being worked on. In the process, I'm thinking, just like I said before, about a buoy on the water. The water is the wave, the energy wave that the particle is moving on currently. And I'm looking to amplify that wave in such a way that it moves the buoy further faster with less energy involved. In other words, it's a timing issue. How do we time our energy inputs to reduce the cost of fuels used to move the buoy through time and space? It's an interesting thinking process. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on it in the comments below. I also look forward to hearing specialists in the field of physics, science, and the like to put their comments down below. And if you really like this kind of content, share your thoughts with me. Tell me what you want to talk about or how you think this might be effective or work. And if you really, really like this content, give it a thumbs up. And if you really, really, really like this content, subscribe. And if you really, really, really like this content, then make a video, post it, and share it with me. Because I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on how this could possibly work. Have a great day.